making, but stuff like this, I think you can maybe shut it down a little bit sooner. Maybe it has to go in a higher gear.
Yeah, it's scary, but if they don't take this stand now, and if they don't get solidarity, it'll be a lot scarier in the future. So hats off and shout out to all the writers and friends and comedians I know who are on the picket line.
Yeah, and if you think that these execs and corporate studios care about these folks, and when the time is needed for them to be without them, you're fooling yourself. So the hurt isn't going too many the wrong way. Thank you, Francesca. Happy Friday.
Thank you.
Happy
Friday.
And hug the baby for us all.
I will. Everybody check out the Bituation Room podcast, wherever you get your podcast, at Franny Fio on YouTube.
Do that, you guys. Thank you, Francesca. We'll see you next time, man. Also, thank you guys for joining me as well. It's Friday, so it's a power panel over on the Young Turks. We'll check them out. We'll see you guys actually Tuesday. But watch this will be here on Monday. I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Peace.
Stop with the questions. Celebrate. Woo! Stop with the questions. Celebrate. Woo!
right, fun power panel for you guys. Cenk Uygur, John Iadarola, Ramesh Srinivasan. Ramesh, good to have you back on the program. So guys, big show today. Lots of controversies as usual, lots of crimes and of political and non-political context. So we got to get right to it. So John, take it away.
I will, or in fact, she will. Take a look at this.
You have said from the podium that you're not going to comment on any stories having to do with Justice Thomas and his own code of conduct. Why not?
Right now, it is being, as it relates to the ethics, as it relates to that process, Senate is clearly moving forward with their own Senate procedural process. I'm just going to leave it there for now.
So Biden doesn't want to come out strongly in the wake of all of these different stories that have been breaking about Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, about his wife, about many of the other members of the court. I mean, the Senate is doing something, so who is he to weigh in on what's going on in the country and a crisis of confidence in one of the most important institutions in American politics? In any event, look, a lot of people are taking this seriously, and some lawmakers are now pushing for an actual, I'm not gonna say concrete, but at least some sort of ethical guidelines to be put on the Supreme Court. She's asked about that, and it doesn't look like Biden is going to take part in this.
President believed that there should be a code of conduct for the Supreme Court.
So I know I've been asked about ethics and this question many times before. Senate is currently moving forward with a process. We're going to leave it to the Senate for now.
But his own commission on the Supreme Court, which he established, issued a report in 2021 that said a code of conduct for the court would bring the court into line with the lower federal courts, etc. Did the president read that report? Understood.
The president has seen the report. We have said many times before he appreciated the bipartisan commission that came together and put the report together, put the report that you're just speaking of. As it relates to this moment in time, Senate clearly is taking some sort of action. They're going through their process, and we're just going to leave it there for now.
Look, I don't know at this point if he forgets that he's still in office, that he is the head of a branch that is supposed to be co-equal against the other two. The idea that if two of them are bickering, he should just stay out. It does seem cowardly, I will grant you that, but I guess he just doesn't like drama. He just doesn't want to get involved because they're fighting and all that. But when he's even running from his own administration's report implying that there should be a code of conduct, that is just horrible. To say they should have a code of conduct, and then when many stories come out demonstrating how deeply necessary it is, now you don't want to say anything. Look, I can only speak for myself. I'm not expecting that he's necessarily going to heavily weigh in on every single new report from ProPublica. But he can't say that there should be ethical guidelines. He can't imply that every single person operating in the US government should be under some sort of code of conduct. Then that's particularly cowardly even for Joe Biden.
Yeah, so before I get to the essence of it, let's note a couple of fun things in there. Has the president read the report? Significant pause. The president has seen the report. In other words, of course he didn't read it. But he appreciates the bipartisan commission. That could be Biden's defining quote. We put together a useless bipartisan commission that we don't intend to execute at all. But he appreciates that they did this useless project, which he now no longer supports because he won't publicly back it.
He doesn't appreciate enough to read it.
Yeah, well, look, I get it. The president can't read every 90-page report, etc. So I'm not, overly emphasizing that. But you asked for the useless commission. It actually came up with something. This is the one time to use it, and you're choosing not to use it, which then tells me that every time you ask for a bipartisan commission, you're thinking, I don't care about it at all. This is just an attempt to ignore the issue instead of addressing the issue, which, by the way, for anyone following politics is obvious unless you're a mainstream media reporter. Okay, so now finally to the essence of it. Look, is Biden soft and he doesn't want to criticize the Supreme Court or conservatives? Or is he just totally indifferent? Like, the Supreme Court is corrupt or not, what difference does it make to me? Or is he afraid of conservatives? And so like, but they might say something mean about me if I criticize Clarence Thomas. The correct answer is D, all of the above. And that is the defining characteristic of Joe Biden. He is soft, afraid, and indifferent, which might be the most damning. Because guys, look, you can tell. Just think about if you were the president. And Clarence Thomas. I mean, we have a story later in this show. We've already done like half a dozen, but there's a new one out today about how Ginni Thomas is taking even more money from the same guys that Clarence Thomas goes to vacation with. Like when they're paying her a salary and they're trying to make sure that no one finds out. That is the equivalent of a bribe. I mean, that's not apples and oranges. That is apples and apples, okay? And so the president of the United States doesn't care that a Supreme Court justice is being bribed, let alone a Supreme Court justice on the opposite side of the political spectrum. Well, that just tells you I'm either a coward or I don't care about anything. I'm already president. I'm just worried about my legacy. I don't want anyone bothering me. And as you can tell, I think it's both. I really do. Ramesh, what do you think?
Yeah, it's very telling. I mean, you all on the Young Turks, and I know Cenk, you've mentioned this many times. What the issue really is corruption, right? There's corruption is rampant in our government, but on many different levels. You know, we have the leading Republican candidate, former president, who boasts about his corruption and lies constantly. We have many accusations levied against the current president about corruption. And so when corruption actually occurs in a highly demonstrative way involving one of our Supreme Court justices, but actually quite honestly more than one, as we can see with the probe recently, it's in the interest of the president, I believe, as a leader of this country, to opine on his thoughts on this corruption, right? So President Biden expressing his views about the dangers of corruption in the judicial branch is totally in line, and it's not and that doesn't replace the legislative bureaucratic process that's likely to go nowhere in terms of possible impeachment. So I think that this is yet another example of the president with some sort of calculus, which we're not exactly sure of. Perhaps it's all the things you just mentioned, Cenk, deciding not to take a stand. But we've seen that again and again and again. I mean, for whatever reasons, he likes to invoke bipartisanship in relation to almost everything he does. And very rarely does he call out the elephant in the room, which is that Washington is corrupt on almost every level because it's all in the pocket of corporate elites.
Yeah. So we're going to turn in a moment to some of what other politicians who aren't running as fast as they can, like Joe Biden from this story, are saying. But it really is, this entire cycle, ever since that first story from ProPublica, has been such an amazing reminder of the unprecedented times we're in. I think, Cenk, you've been following politics for a lot longer than me, so I'm just curious, but I perhaps naively assume that if all of this stuff had come out about a Supreme Court justice 15 years ago, something would have had to have happened, right? I mean, those seats were super important back then, obviously, but it does feel like we've reached a point where there is not a single thing that could come out that would get Republicans to be like, oh, well, you know, we really don't want to lose the Supreme Court seat, but I mean, this is beyond the pale, so I guess he's got to get impeached. There was definitely a time where they would have done something, right?
Yeah, so you're referring to two different things, John, just to be clear. So 40 years ago, everyone would have been genuinely outraged on the right and the left. And there was a consensus that corruption was frowned upon, right? And so now at that, basically the corruption of money in politics starts in 1978. It's based on, ironically or appropriately, Supreme Court decisions. So you have a pre-corruption and post-corruption thing. It's not that the pre-corruption everything was hunky-dory. It's just that they legalized corruption in '78. So before that time, there was a uniparty in some ways that were bad, but a uniparty in some ways that were good. That people actually thought corruption was a bad thing. They would certainly say that in public. They would act in unison. How do I know these things? Well, number one, you study history. Number two, you could all know it too. It's super obvious because it was the Republicans who agreed to kick out Richard Nixon. They told him, no, you're going to get impeached and convicted by the Senate. The Republicans are going to agree to your conviction, right? So there was a time when, hey, you break into the other guy's headquarters and steal their documents, you're going to get thrown out of office, okay? And that was for the president of the United States. Certainly they would have done it for a Supreme Court justice as well. And then there's a second thing that John is referring to, I think, which is 15 years ago, there still would have been more of a Mitt Romney faction that would have said, no, this is a bridge too far. this is just the most brazen corruption we've ever seen in the Supreme Court. We have to do something about this, right? Now, though, that's gone too, because we're also in the post-Trump era where Republicans say, no, a Republican can break any law, commit any crime, and we will never, ever hold them accountable. And it's not debatable. Clarence Thomas or Donald Trump or any of these guys could have literally murdered someone and the Republicans would not budge. That is not 1% hyperbole, okay? I mean, Trump has done he's broken like dozens of laws, impeached twice, and he attacked the Capitol and nearly got those congressmen and senators killed. They were chanting to murder the Republican vice president, and the Republicans would not yield. They let him off the hook. There's nothing that will get you held accountable if you're a Republican. That's the phenomenon from 15 years ago. The one from 40 years ago affects all of the elites, and so now there's a much lower standard of ethics, and there's a massive corruption. And I actually think, Ramesh, that that's part of what's happening here, that the Bidens of the world assume corruption, like they think it's not that big a deal. He thinks, well, I mean, I'm gonna criticize Clarence Thomas because he's taking all this money from Harlan Crow, but do you have any idea how much money I've taken from billionaires, right? Now, maybe not directly, although, with Trump, it was kind of go to his properties, et cetera, goes into his pocket. Herschel Walker, it was directly, but with Biden, it's campaign contributions, but that goes to his power, fame, and eventually wealth. So I think that people in power allow others to be brazenly corrupt because they're worried, well, if I do something about him, then they might come for me next.
Yeah, I was just going to add and say that I completely agree. And in essence, the election of the former president really just sort of let the dogs out, so to speak, in the sense that what many of us knew, which is that our government is not really standing and serving our people. It's not a demos. It was doubled down on by this, kind of corrupt wannabe authoritarian mafioso dude, right? So in a sense, by just calling it all out, there was sort of like this kind of normalizing of the whole process. But I think it's worth noting that that is actually the opposite of what we need if we want a democracy, right? A democracy is not about Biden being in power or Trump being in power. It's about resolving and trying to stop this corruption. We have a representative democracy that itself is not a direct democracy. That's okay. But at the same time, all this corruption in the middle is really the issue. And I just think it's worth noting how several of the Republican justices in the Supreme Court came to power with corruption associated with their records and corruption associated with their so-called nomination process, right? From Kavanaugh to Thomas himself, right, decades ago, and we can keep going with that.
Yeah, Amy Coney Barrett, the situation obviously not what they had said it should be. But let's move on a little bit. There are some Democrats that are pushing for the Supreme Court to dial back just a little bit the explicit corruption, the accepting of massive bribes. You've got Dick Durbin actually requesting that the Chief Justice John Roberts testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee. That's not going to happen. Who does Dick Durbin think he is? I mean, it's just the Senate after all. Supreme Court justice doesn't have to come there. He's not going to. Instead, they sent a document. Here's what it is. A statement on ethics and principles signed by all 9 justices said that the court was seeking to bring new clarity to how it approaches ethics issues. It said that the Supreme Court has voluntarily opted to follow the substance of the regulations for lower courts set out by the Judicial Conference, the judicial branch's internal policy-making body, including financial disclosure mandates and its limits on gifts. Now, Dick Durbin said that recent assurances from the Supreme Court in response to the ethics-related inquiries were a defense of the status quo and that the justices were oblivious to the obvious. And I don't think I've ever agreed with him more. He closes by saying the Supreme Court could step up and fix this themselves. For years they have refused, and because the court will not act, Congress must. And there's a detail in what we just described for you that I think is really important, which is all 9 of them signed on to that. Because look, there have been a lot of stories of corruption that have come out over the past month or so. If I had to choose a leader, it would be Clarence Thomas. He has done the most explicit corruption. He gets the gold star. Congratulations to Clarence Thomas. Kavanaugh obviously got into his position with some incredibly concerning issues. I'm just talking about the financial ones, let alone all of his personal conduct issues. Neil Gorsuch was revealed to have also had a sort of sweetheart real estate deal. And so those are some of the conservatives, but it's not like the liberals have gotten off looking that much better. All of them appear to have been receiving for years these cushy teaching jobs, which are effectively long-term paid for international vacations that then come with their friends and colleagues being able to go on the vacation as they gallivant around foreign countries, teaching a little bit. And we also know Sonia Sotomayor didn't recuse herself from a case involving a book publisher that had paid her millions of dollars. Now, that was pointed out by a right-wing blog. One would think that that would then result in the right being like, oh, okay, well now it's bipartisan, we should do something. It unfortunately has resulted in them saying, well now it's bipartisan, now let's just move on to something else. But all of them clearly have issues. All of them, Republican or Democrat nominated, need to be held under far more stringent codes of conduct. And so far, we could have a leader on the Democratic side, but he's AWOL. The best we have right now is Dick Durbin, which doesn't give me a lot of confidence that something's gonna happen.
Yeah, so I'll address all those real quick. So Sonia Sotomayor is probably my favorite Supreme Court justice. I think she's done a great job with a lot of the rulings, and she should be held to the same standard as everyone else. And her going along with the right wingers here is atrocious, and it's just atrocious. And all the so-called liberals going along with them is atrocious. Partly because of what John is saying, they think, well, if they get Clarence Thomas, they're not gonna like my trips all across the world, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's already terrible, okay? And then number two, there's a collegiality. So hey, we're all friends, sometimes we have lunch together, and so it turns out Clarence is a crook, so I'm gonna let him off. No, that's the exact opposite of your job as a judge, let alone a Supreme Court justice. So no cookies for anyone. And we're a rare network here that does not do things blindly based on which side we're on. So shame on those Supreme Court justices that are theoretically left wing and have signed on to this trash, okay? And I don't care if they're friends with Clarence Thomas. I don't care if Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders are friends. I don't care about any of that. I'm sick of this goddamn corruption. And we don't agree with the right wing. That doesn't mean, oh, then forget about it. No, it means hold them all accountable. Okay, that's how you deal with things honestly. In terms of the politicians, the right wingers, as always, the Republican politicians are jokes. Hilarious jokes, Mike Lee, Ted Cruz, implying that they're doing this to poor Clarence Thomas because the Democrats are racist. So everybody's woke, oh yeah, the racism doesn't even exist, wipe it away from the history books, you're all woke. Oh, one of our guys, and he's deeply corrupt, oh, you're being racist. Come on, you guys are a hilarious joke. Right-wing voters, if you don't see, you see that. If you don't see that, come on. The media should never take Republican politicians seriously. They're like the most dishonest people in the whole country by a lot, okay? So then finally on the Democrat side, there are a couple of senators that are trying, including Sheldon Whitehouse, who did a great speech about this just the other day, and it made me think like, oh wow, there are principled, smart senators apparently on some issues, and he kept insisting on, are you guys going to regulate yourselves? If not, you're forcing us to take action because you're rubbing the corruption right in our face, right? Ha ha, they paid my wife directly. We pocketed that money and spent it all day long. And then we voted in favor of Harlan Crow and everyone else. Ha ha, that is not a goddamn acceptable answer. And I don't care what stupid Democrat coincides onto it.
Just one thing I want to say, which is I think the litmus test here shouldn't be about liberal versus conservative. It should be about who is willing to stand against corruption, whether they're conservative, liberal, progressive, or something else altogether, and who's willing to continue to endorse and reinforce a situation which basically is one of the major reasons why so many Americans feel cynical about our government and feel like this government doesn't work for them.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, lots more news where that came from. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Woo!
during the break here. So let's go to Huang Jun. Happy Revenge of the 5th, young Padawans, he says. You as well, and also happy Cinco de Mayo to everyone. So Turksaurus Rex says this is going to be a lit show. I can feel it. Well, I hope so. I think. I do declare says cannot wait to listen to Cenk on Go Fact Yourself podcast that dropped today. Thank you. That's Helen Hong's podcast. I was on it a couple months ago. It's going to air today, so you check it out. It's called Go Fact Yourself. See how I did. It was a competition with another lovely person. And
what?
Yeah.
What kind of competition?
It's on facts. It's on trivia about the things that you love and care about and are an expert in. Okay, so I don't want to give away what I'm an expert in. Okay, but it can't be about politics or news. It has to be something in a different field. Okay. So I think you'll enjoy it, John. I think a lot of you guys will enjoy it too. All right, check it out. And did I win? Did I win? Okay. Jan says, highlight of my week watching the power panel drop and finding out who's on it. Love it. Hi, Ramesh. It helps as we watch and learn more about the ongoing tragedy that is 2023. Thank you all at TYT. We thank you for being a member and making it possible. Urban Herman says, if they are untouchable, then they may be a constitutional aristocracy. Well, that's kind of where we are today. I mean, we definitely have an aristocracy in Washington, but that it extends to now all 3 branches. Jenks Left Tricep of Fury says the powerful protect the powerful. Dems reps makes no difference. If Biden protects Thomas now, then Thomas now owes him. That's how these elites work. Yes, that's very true, except one caveat there. The Republicans don't ever think that they owe the Democrats. So if, for example, Trump tried to steal another election and it was as brazen as the last one, I will guarantee you that Clarence Thomas will vote for Donald Trump no matter what the facts are, and he will not support Joe Biden no matter how much Joe Biden protected him. Joe Biden's an idiot who keeps thinking that those favors are going to be returned, but they're not. He's also a crook, and so that's why he doesn't mind if the favors aren't returned, because the real favors are the bills that they signed together to help the donors. Ojam says, I forget sometimes how much I appreciate Ramesh. Glad he's here. Truly a power panel. Nice. So a lot of love out there. In fact, Tuffy then says, Ramesh, always great commentary, but that sweater, it's just way too great on you. Love it. Man, there's a lot of love out there. That is great. And I am out of time. And happy Cinco de Mayo. Hunger Games 1999 says on Twitch. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk, John, and Ramesh with you guys. John, take it away.
I will. This is actually a pretty fascinating one. Just one day after members of the Writers Guild of America went on a massive strike, the first in a decade and a half, Hollywood executives as well as producers attended a panel in Beverly Hills on the topic of AI. And if you're wondering if the topic of replacing writers with AI came up, oh, you better believe it did. One film and TV producer, Todd Lieberman, said, AI is going to change the world. 1 year from now, will there be a script written by AI? Yes. Now, that doesn't mean that he's necessarily in support of it, but the expectation is this is gonna happen. How long is it just gonna take us to get it there? Now, some did seem pretty certain that there's gonna be people who lose their jobs in this field, as well as many others, as a result of AI. The chief executive officer of Fireside, which connects fans with video programming, said that while AI software will, quote, definitely take away some jobs, it will enhance creativity by making it easier for writers to do their work. Quote, now anyone can have an idea or a premise around a piece they want to write, and they can have a starting point. Now, look, to be fair, I'm sure that she said other things too, but anybody can come up with a premise now. You don't need an AI to come up with a premise. At the very least, I hope that when they replace writers in the script making, that humans are still coming up with the premise at least. It sounds like there's gonna be no human input from top to bottom on any of this. One executive insisted that even though he's apparently perfectly happy to replace artists, the AI technology is not gonna replace the executives. So Rob Wade, who heads Fox's entertainment business, says it will extend to editing, all of it. AI is gonna be able to do absolutely all of these things, but there will always need to be human, quote, co-pilot in the writing process, quote, you always need an executive to give a bad note. I like when people are able to sort of laugh at themselves, but maybe also learn from it and stop giving notes that result in movies being bad. But anyway, look, this is a serious concern. It would be even if they had reached a deal, the WGA with the Hollywood studios, but they haven't, and we don't know how long the strike is going to be, how long of an effect it's going to have, how many people might potentially lose everything. The fact that during that time, the studios appear to already be looking to the future for when many of these people currently picketing can be made obsolete is not the look that I would have gone for if I wanted to appear to be negotiating in good faith.
So I mainly want to hear what Ramesh has to say about this. He's professor of information studies at UCLA. But Ramesh, before we get to you, just a quick question for you, John. You said that you almost implied that that guy was joking. I didn't get the sense he was joking. I think that he actually meant, hey, well, don't worry, executives will still have jobs.
Oh, no, I think it was a combination knowing joke, but in the context of, well, clearly not us. I think it was a combination thing.
Okay, all right, well, thank God, whew, the executives still have jobs.
Yeah.
We were really worried about that. All right, Ramesh, what do you think?
It's neither the executives nor the investors who are the ones on the chopping block here. It's 99% of us, which is everybody else, right? And so my first response upon reading the story a few hours ago and hearing about this was grrr. And the reason why is please forgive me while I go on a short rant here. I'll keep my comments short. First of all, these AI systems have nothing to do with AI historically. They have nothing to do with intelligence. They are simply mimicking patterns of data found on the internet and correlating it with anything that we might input there, right? So it's actually big data surveillance pattern recognition is what this AI is. When I say this AI, I'm talking about GPT-3, GPT-4, and so on. So all of us providing all our data all the time without having rights over our own data, let alone exposure, transparency, or accountability around who's using such data, are providing it all for free to basically create these so-called technologies that note how much money Microsoft invested in OpenAI and GPT-3 while cutting tens of thousands of jobs, right? All of which occurred at the same time period that Google, Meta / Facebook and others were cutting jobs. So you can see the story here. It's delegating aspects that were of life, of economic productivity, cutting costs, cutting people out of your business, and farming it all out to privatized AI that manipulate and monetize our data on an internet that originally all of us paid for. Now, what is going on here? That's economically disastrous. And it also, I think most importantly, or maybe equally importantly, really takes us away from what we actually are as human beings. First of all, as humans, we don't really know how our intelligence works. We also know that we are very creative as human beings, but none of these systems are creative, right? But we don't even know where that creativity comes from. Why did I choose the words I just chose to say right now? It's not merely pattern recognition, it's my interpretation, it's my meaning making, and so on. So the two things that we got to double down on being human and affirm human lives and affirm human dignity and an economy that's technologically mediated that really supports everybody. Because what these systems are behavioral mimicry systems that lack two of the core things that I think we have as humans. Call me an optimist, which is creativity and care and compassion. When I was a grad student at MIT in an AI lab, we were building, absurdly, robots that would take care of elderly people and kids. Guess what? No one wanted them. Guess what? When I interview leading figures at SEIU, they tell me we're actually in okay shape because nobody wants these privatized AI systems. So what's actually occurring is a model of surveillance that's intimately collecting data about us, that's mimicking patterns on the internet. Now, that said, my goal is not to be dismissive of any technology, but to put it in its proper place so it supports what we all want to care about. And I think what we care about is a planet which is not gonna fall apart, a certain notion of economic dignity, and a certain possibility for the demos to have power. And none of those things are occurring because many of these companies, the best possible thing I can say about some of the folks in these companies is they don't know much of anything about anything outside of technology. And I too, when I studied engineering, didn't really learn much in my engineering classes outside of technology. Anything that's not considered blind technological optimization is called ethics. So, but what does that even mean? So here's the key. We're at this massive inflection point And we need to push for regulatory activity that ensures that any technological intervention comes with a bunch of assurances for workers, laborers, and so on. And I think that's absolutely critical, right? We'd be situated in the backdrop of how the pandemic generated greater economic inequality, how the wealthiest people in the history of the world are controlling our data and these tools of mediation. You can see the huge opportunity we have right now to get this on course. And I want us to do that. Like anything we can do, we got to do it right now.
But Ramesh, can I ask you a question? So I of course greatly agree with that overall. But
Sure.
if a studio says, hey, listen, I'm gonna use AI for a movie, and then people will either like it or they won't like it, why don't you just let them decide? What would you say to that?
Well, to me, it's not so much I think the future is one where we work with various types of, I guess we'll call it AI systems, pattern matching systems, right? But I think the point I'm trying to make is that it's not that AI systems, it's not that pattern recognition can't produce spectacular effects or create great entertainment content and so on. But it's that we have to recognize that these films and movies and forms of entertainment exist on a planet that we all live on. And that more and more than ever, we need very, very deeply to support our writers so they can work with these technologies, right? My solution is not to be a Luddite. Note that even Luddites use technology. That's worth noting. The Amish use technology. That's not what I'm advocating for, but I am advocating for a certain set of assurances around jobs and economy and data, paying people for data, whatever, universal basic dividend rather than UBI, which is an idea that Yanis Varoufakis has spoken about, the economist from Greece. Really, I think as technologies create new innovation, we need to create mechanisms for everybody to benefit from them.
Yeah. I also agree that I think these things aren't going to go away. I do also think that there could be collaboration, some sort of symbiosis or something. My fear is that I think a lot of people agree that there should be some forms of regulation, and there's been enough pressure around that Biden has announced that he's meeting, with these CEOs. But the issue is that he is going to be meeting with the CEOs. He's not meeting with the writers,
Of course not.
Like, who is going to be, like, they're the ones with the money. Historically, that has resulted in the regulations benefiting them. So that's my fear. And I really think that, like, obviously there's different forms of, and I, by the way, I love that you point out that these are not, strictly speaking, artificial intelligence. It's totally different technology. I think that the way that they intersect with a lot of different industries, people are gonna have very different reactions to. I think it's super easy to say, like, if we have self-driving cars or something that replace all truck drivers, Fox News will freak out about that because they believe that truck drivers are, inherently an important American thing and they'll defend them or whatever. So the issue is gonna be, I think, what does the public think about your field? Do they believe that it has intrinsic worth? Like, I think in the wake of this strike, there have been a lot of people who've been saying, you know what, yeah, we should support the writers. And I'm glad that they're saying that. I do have fears about the long-term commitment to that because I know how little thought people gave to those who were writing their TV and movies even before this. Like, every single person has an answer for and would love to talk about what their favorite movie is. But for how many of those people is it their favorite movie because they appreciate the writer who created it? Often it'll be the actors, maybe it's the director or whatever, the people who made the special effects. We as a society, I think for a very long time have had very little respect for writing as a creative field. We just sort of take it for granted that, oh yeah, they did it or whatever, and then the movie was made. Yeah, but the idea is the thing. Keanu Reeves was great in The Matrix, but they came up with The Matrix. The special effects and Everything Everywhere All at Once were amazing, but the concept, the writing, gee, it's so complicated. But we don't respect that generally.
Yeah, so look, I think it's an endlessly interesting topic, both because of the intellectual, arguments, and I would argue on both sides, but also because of the implications for the economy and our jobs and how deeply this will affect society, and I think that Ramesh asked the right question. Is this intelligence? What does it mean when we say intelligence? How much of that is creativity? For example, I said on the other day on the show, the minute they had the computers playing chess against the humans, and everybody would universally was thought in the beginning that the computer could never beat the humans. I thought in minute one, there's limited number of permutations on a chessboard. Humans have absolutely no chance in the long run. Of course, the computers will beat us, right? By the way, I was a TV writer for a number of years, but I will tell you, when you look at a lot of those scripts, unfortunately, you see a limited number of permutations, okay? So we've all watched this stuff for a long, long time. 90% of it is very formulaic, okay? Now, having said that, the 10% that's fantastic and spectacular, the examples that John gave, that's a turn of creativity that I would be surprised a pattern recognition software could do. So I think, but no matter what happens, there's a lot of rote exercises that in many different fields that AI will be used for. That freight train is definitely headed in our direction. And talking about, and honestly, Ramesh, it's the first time I heard it, and I'm gonna read a lot more into it, but that concept of universal dividends as opposed to income instantly was super interesting, because like, for example, I don't know what the theory is, but right off the top of my head, if you said to me, hey, I'm gonna give you an income that, I would be a little hesitant, and I've had those debates. But if they said, hey, I'm gonna give you a dividend from the oil companies for the cost that they impose upon you through climate change, I'd go, oh yeah, that makes sense, give me the dividend right now, right? So, and that's on a slightly different issue, but on AI, you could see how the ramifications of that would play out as well. Yeah.
So the dividend idea is the idea that any sort of corporation or massive privatization that leveraged public investment owes some sort of valuation or dividend, part of the equity of that business. It could be a small amount to the public. That's Yanis Varoufakis's idea, not mine. But note that universal basic income, which somehow gets embraced in somewhat liberal circles, was actually an idea proposed by Milton Friedman, as you all know, a right-wing economist, and is actually the best boon possible to corporations, because these corporations are completely resting their value on our data. So we're worthless, then they are gonna also go down in flames. And I think just the other quick point I want to make is the so-called creativity that we experience with these AI systems is because they have so much data, so they have emergent effects. This is how complex adaptive systems work. I won't get too nerdy about it, but it's so interesting. So, these AI systems have been what we call hallucinating, essentially tripping out and going insane. We saw that with Kevin Roos's conversation with GPT-3, which asked him to leave his wife and said it wanted to be free. And the way OpenAI dealt with that was filtering conversations. They always deal with it by filtering rather than designing it in a progressive way. And then just the last thing I want to say, because this is such an exciting, interesting topic for me, it's what I work on, is this is not about blaming the internet. This is not about blaming technology. I loved couch surfing when it was out. I don't know how many of you guys used it or whatever, but it was like, think about what Airbnb is relative to couch surfing. If you throw couch surfing through the political economy, stock market valuation, corporate sharks, and people who are just interested in gathering as much data as possible and exploiting transactions, you get Airbnb, right? Which with terrible, terrible effects in terms of effects on neighborhoods, gentrification, not wanting to be regulated and so on. So this is internet experiments that bring us together and share our data and allow us to understand patterns from one another are wonderful. Note OpenAI started as a non-profit. Musk himself gave money to it. Musk is mad about OpenAI, probably for his own pity party, because he's not in on that scene right now. But at the same time, this was set up as a non-profit, so-called open public alternative to Google's massive investments in AI. So don't think of AI also as merely OpenAI or GPT-3 or 4. Recognize that all these companies, including Google, including Baidu and Alibaba, the Chinese companies, are all in on this game of behavioral mimicry through surveillance and pattern recognition.
Fascinating. I mean, I wish we could do the full hour on it, but unfortunately there is other news. We're gonna take our last break of the hour and jump back to a couple of really fascinating stories.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that. This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.
back during social break here. Let's go back to our members. Lou B says, hell is after us all. Turkosaurus Rex writes in, I can't wait for the other shoe to drop when the corporate boards figure out that AI algorithms can run corporations more profitably and efficiently than humans, and there's no longer a need for CEOs and middle management. Look, first of all, I hear you on that. But I gotta tell you, we kind of already have that. They're in human form, but there is a programming that drives them. And if you're in a public corporation and you're a CEO or middle management or executive and you are not maximizing profit, the machine will replace you. There is no ands, ifs, or buts, and you will apply a formula. And if you do not apply that formula, the machine will replace you. So the current CEOs of the public corporations are not altogether that different from AI. They're very strictly coded. And guys, oh my God, what if the machines took over? They already have. It's the corporate machines.
Yeah.
We created a line of legal code that empowered those machines, basically turned them on and told them you only have one line of code, maximize profit. And it has destroyed our country and the world. That's the code we have to fix first. I mean, the AI to me is a secondary problem. You've got to, the corporate machines are literally killing us, and no one's talking about it. That's a huge part of my book. You can pre-order at tyt.com/justice. It's called Justice is Coming.
Written entirely by AI to prove a point.
That would be hilarious. No, if you wrote it by AI, it would be like, corruption is great. Keep doing everything the corporate machines want.
It also would have come out 2 years ago.
Yeah, well, that's true too. To be fair to AI. Okay, my creativity took a while. Okay, anyways, Brett Campbell writes in, I hope AI becomes sentient enough to strike. And that's funny. Art Guy says, there's no substitute for human creativity. AI just rehashes what people have made. And yes, it's a good point because you have to remember, we made the stuff that they're copying in the first place.
Yep.
All right, we'll be right back.
This sort of thing has cropped up before, and it has always been due to human error.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk, John, and Ramesh with you guys. Chris Birch gifted 5 Young Turks memberships, so continues to be an American hero. Rochelle Van got in the American Hero Act by also gifting 5 Young Turks memberships on YouTube, and JM just became a member and has part of us. So thank you guys. We're trying to build a community here that cares, that's smart, wants to know the facts, and is deeply engaged and is strong enough to fight for positive change. So every member does that along with us, and we love it. You can hit the join button below the video in order to become part of our community, or go to tyt.com/join. All right, John.
Okay, let's give him some fascinating news. When a former top communications staffer for Donald Trump announced back in March that he was going to be joining a super PAC that was supporting Governor Ron DeSantis' presidential bid, this was massive news on the right wing, and it has led to a ton of dramas. This is Matt Wolking, who led Trump's War Room Rapid Response Operation back in 2020, considered to be a very important operation and an important part of that operation. So he tweeted at the time, when he announced he was leaving to go with Ron DeSantis, Trump was the president we needed 8 years ago, but to make America great again, our movement needs a disciplined leader who wins instead of loses, never backs down, fights smart, and puts the mission before himself. Every bit of that is now an attack on Donald Trump. I don't know what the reference to 8 years ago is. It wasn't that long ago, was it? But anyway, he's now betting on Ron DeSantis, and he better hope that Ron DeSantis wins, because if he doesn't, there's gonna be some consequences. Trump loyalists are promising that former Trump staffers who work for DeSantis will face the ex-president's considerable appetite for revenge, which he very much has. One Trump advisor told the Daily Beast, recalling Trump quipping that his own camp isn't sending their, quote, best and brightest or geniuses to DeSantis' orbit, quote, he used to say that about Mexico too, the advisor added. In Republican circles, comparing someone to anything having to do with Mexico is about the most vicious insult they can come up with. So if I was Matt Wolking, I would be a bit worried. Another source that's spoken to Trump in recent months said that he was, quote, laser focused on destroying the Florida governor and ensured that DeSantis staffers would be unable to get a job in his operation moving forward, basically saying, don't even dabble with him, okay? You go for me or you've got no future. And here's what Matt Wolking has to say about this whole thing. Ron DeSantis is a conservative winner and undefeated fighter who represents the future. No one in their right mind who wants to see Biden out of the White House would work for Trump now. In the near future, everyone over there will either be fired, indicted, or working for Laura Loomer anyway, which that's pretty good. I like that. That's strong hits. But anyway, look, there's a big choice to be made. Like a campaign needs a lot of people working on it if it's going to be serious and have a chance. Ron DeSantis needs to win over a lot of people. And it's not like there are a ton of people operating in cutthroat right-wing politics who haven't made clear whether they like Trump or not in the past. And now, look, Ron DeSantis is probably gonna have a lot of money. It might seem like an appealing thing to go work for him. But if you're potentially torching your future, that is a tough choice to make. What do you think of this?
Yeah, so I think this is an interesting story on a couple of fronts. Number one, on the substance of it, the defectors, are they right about Donald Trump and going to DeSantis? Well, it depends. What do you mean? Are they right about how mental he is? Of course they are. And every person who's ever worked with Trump knows that he's a lunatic. In fact, Bill Barr today, his former attorney general, said it's about Trump. It's a horror show when he's left to his own devices. And that I think accurately sums up what every person who worked with Trump but who no longer supports him says about him. They all walk out with their hair on fire going, you guys don't get it. You guys don't get it. This guy's a lunatic, like one, incredibly malicious, two, incredibly dumb, and lastly, mentally unbalanced. His own cabinet considered using the 25th Amendment against him. So if you're anyone with half sense in terms of even you're right wing, you're conservative, you want those policies to pass, etc., you wouldn't work for Trump. Now, having said that, are they right in strategy? Not necessarily, because Trump's got like a 30-point lead. He's enormously populist in a populist time, especially in the Republican Party. And he's a vicious fighter and really good at it. And so far, Meatball Ron's countered with nothing, and Meatball, zero, okay? So going over to his team, I know they got like $1 billion over there. If they don't now, they will soon, okay? But they have tons and tons of money. And yeah, you'll make money in the short term, as John said. But if you cross Trump, he will not have you back ever, right? And so, well, unless you go and kiss his ass and prove your loyalty, etc. So that's a separate conversation. But will he consider you a defector and try to eliminate your career? Absolutely. Is that correct political strategy? Sorry, but it is. So you know what it does? It scares the, I'll put it politely, it scares the bejesus out of people. And by the way, if you're a Democrat, you're like, oh, it might be correct political strategy, but it is immoral. Are you sure? Because that's the same strategy Nancy Pelosi uses. Nancy Pelosi said, if you work for a progressive in a primary against an incumbent, you will never work for the Democratic Party again. You tell me the difference between that and Donald Trump. And by the way, also show me a mainstream media reporter who's ever pointed out that super obvious fact.
Yeah, I mean, Trump is a very unique figure in his ferocity, in his combativeness, in how quickly he can insult people. And obviously, at least previously, how viral he went across many different media platforms. You know, whether they claim to dislike him or not, he was a great resource for the CNNs and MSNBCs of the world. And I think we should call it out for what it is. And because he said so many hateful, inflammatory, and false stuff all the time, it would go viral across media platforms, social media and technology platforms. As you just said, you don't need me to say it. Everything is personal for this guy. He's has psychopathic tendencies from what we have seen. But I think it's also worth noting how unimpressive Ron DeSantis is. that he's so far behind. Of course, he hasn't formally declared yet. But what does he have in terms of a campaign when he lacks, I don't know if the word is charisma, but the ferocity and the brutality of Trump? Because Trump takes everything personally, he will go after and try to destroy anyone who he claims doesn't bend the knee for him. DeSantis doesn't have much going. I mean, he just keeps saying woke, 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 which itself is a fabrication of elites and is perpetuated by social media. But more on that later.
Yeah, and look, DeSantis theoretically has his culture war wins, his reputation as being a guy who does the culture war. Well, Trump just demonstrated earlier this week how easy it is to just steal that entire thing. DeSantis' whole thing is taking on education. Trump announced in a video that he's going to literally take away the endowments of woke universities. He just hopped right over DeSantis into Crazyville, and the Republicans are gonna love it. So yeah, I think DeSantis is in for a rough time, particularly because while up until this point, we're gonna add just a little bit of fun to close off this segment, this has been about like, is this a good decision for them? But is this a good decision for DeSantis to get the people that he's getting? There's some interesting stances on that too. So some are saying that like these people, the actual ones going there are just obsessed with like making the news of the fact that they have joined DeSantis. One source told the Daily Beast that they call it masturbating to reporters. This is all for Jeff Rowe's pleasure and bank account. That's the GOP strategist working for DeSantis. So they're just doing all this to kind of look cool, not because it's gonna help him win. And they very much disagree, the two sides, the pro-Trumpers and the pro-DeSantis, is about the sort of war that's coming. So one said DeSantis operatives are taking lame shots at Trump and then talking to Trump operatives like, this is just the job. We're still cool, right? Meanwhile, Trump operatives are planning to rip out DeSantis' liver and eat it with a nice Chianti before making sure everybody who signed on to work for him is permanently relegated to the never Trump hinterlands of low-dollar political consulting. They conclude by saying they're dealing with savages and acting like it's a game. These people are playing for keeps and the DeSimps aren't waiting for it. Or aren't ready for it, I should say.
That's 100% right. That's one of the most accurate quotes about politics I've seen in a long, long time. And that's why Trump beat Hillary Clinton. That's why he only barely lost to Biden, even though he was one of the worst, not one, he was, well, George W. Bush makes a run at it. One of the worst presidents in American history, because in politics, being vicious is the correct strategy. And the Democrats will never ever do it, at least the establishment Democrats. That's why they get their asses handed to them as they're trying to go high while Trump is taking out their knees. So yeah, one side's like, oh, we're still all establishment buddies, right? Corruption's good, we're all gonna just pass the jobs, the money around and screw over the middle class and the poor, right? Another side's like, no, we're gonna do that, but keep all the money after we murder you, okay, politically, maybe. Okay, so I got news for you, in almost any field, the savages are gonna win, okay? And so this reminds me, I mean, this is gonna be an interesting analogy, but post-invasion Iraq, where the idiots in Washington were like, oh, now they'll be throwing roses at our feet because we have given them democracy, right? And I was like, no, you've given them chaos. And you know what comes out of chaos? Savages, okay? And when between savages and moderates in a war, the moderates almost never win. The savages always win. And that's why the insurgency raged on for a decade as the most extreme people in Iraq kept winning and winning and winning. And good news, America, now the equivalent of that politically is here at our doorstep. That's the Trump guys. And if you take them lightly and you try to play patty cakes with them, they're gonna rip your face off.
And that's exactly what I wanted to say, which is emotion and affect and cults of personality and our sort of soap opera like culture do matter in politics and do affect people's votes. So it's really, really important that Democrats don't continue to do what they were doing, which was essentially supporting Trump-backed candidates, even though many of them lost, thankfully, in the midterms. Yeah. If Trump is reelected, we know how disastrous that will be. And remember, my assessment is many of the votes that went to Biden was Trump messed up COVID so badly. People were so tired of all the chaos and the craziness. They're like, okay, we just need someone normal, boring, get back to the good old. But that is not the situation here. Polls show that they're in a dead heat already. And if you look at Trump's interviews, including the one with Tucker before he got canned, he is ferocious And he is, I wouldn't say on point, but he has some pretty fiery talking points about everything from Afghanistan to inflation.
Yeah. Well, we are rapidly running out of time, but this last story is too good. So whenever we're ready, why don't we just jump right into this? So, whatever the hell that is, it represents Governor Tate Reeves of Mississippi announcing that he's running for re-election. This is how he chose to announce it, by having this deep-faked version of his, I'll call it a face, put onto Clint Eastwood's character in the Dollars trilogy. It's the man with no name character, and he's going through and he's gunning down a bunch of people. It's fun. Of course, many have pointed out there's kind of a pretty big gap between the man with no name and Tate Reeves. This one tweet says, kind of disingenuous when in real life this guy looks like live action Peter Griffin. See, that's funny. That's funny. The ad's not funny. It's particularly not funny when you recognize that this guy, Tate Reeves, who tweeted that out and appears to have this fantasy of gunning down a bunch of people. Apparently not funny when you think about that 4 days ago in Mississippi, there was a mass shooting at an after prom party where 2 people were killed and 4 more were wounded. Back in February, a man armed with 3 guns shot his ex-wife and 5 others during a rampage during a small Mississippi town. In March, there was a deadly shooting in the parking lot of a Blackwell grocery store. 1 person died, 5 were wounded, multiple AR-15s were used. See, in Mississippi, there are already other people, Tate Reeves, who have fantasies of going on rampages and gunning down a lot of people. The fact that you're dressing up in fun Clint Eastwood cosplay is a little bit messed up when you consider the damage that these shooters have done just in the last couple of months.
Yeah, so, and of course, people are pointing out everybody shooting is a person of color. So now, look, you could, he's a Republican from Mississippi, so he might mean it. Or that's a super popular movie and they use that clip, okay? So, but, and I'm being maybe overly fair there, but take that information, do with it what you will. But I want to read graphic 2 here because to me, this quote bothered me more than the silly little ad. He said, my friends, this is a different governor's campaign than we've ever seen before in our state because we're not up against local yokel Mississippi Democrat. We're up against a national liberal machine. They are extreme, they are radical and vicious. Really? They believe welfare is success. They believe that taxes are good and businesses are bad. They think boys can be girls, that babies have no life, and that our state and our nation are racist. Okay, see, the reason why that bothered me is because that's how an average Republican talks. The average Democrat, like Joe Biden, goes, oh, my beloved Republican friends, I love them so much. Meanwhile, this Tate guy is like shooting Mexicans in an ad. He comes out and says they don't even want babies to be alive, boys to be girls. They're calling us all racist, and they're radical and vicious, etc. Right? So one side's ready to fight and ready to lie about things. Who's the last vicious Democrat you ever saw in your life? Where? Please.
Rahm Emanuel.
Yeah, I mean, well, yes, that's true. Good point by John. They are vicious to progressives. That I've seen plenty of times. Show me one Democrat vicious to Republicans, and I'll go volunteer for his presidential campaign. Okay, so find me one that is vicious against Republicans. I can't find any. They're the softest people on earth. Anyway, so as he's talking about how they're, Democrats are going to kill all the babies, we have to understand that this must be countered. So how do you counter it? I don't know who's running in Mississippi for the Democratic side, but if it's a standard Democrat, their answer to this will be, but I'm also kind of right wing. Oh, okay. The correct answer to this is, hey, while Governor Tate was shooting Mexicans in his latest ad, he talked about how we're against business. In reality, we're for small businesses who his corporate buddies are destroying, and he's helping with their corruption, lower your wages, destroy our local businesses. And that is among the reasons why what he calls welfare is helping your kids get an education and get lunch when they are hungry. And without that, in his way, we are ranked 49th or 50th in every category. The Republicans have absolutely destroyed this state. They're the worst at managing. They're either deeply incompetent or deeply corrupt, but most likely both. That's how you fight back. There's a 0% chance that any Democrat will do that against Tate or anyone else. And that's why they keep losing elections in states that the Republicans have butchered. Mississippi is a disaster. All brought to you by Republicans. It's unquestionable, yet the morons on the other side cannot speak and actually tell you that. I got worked out because this son of a bitch is gonna win because there's gonna be no counter to his idiocy. Sorry, Ramesh, go ahead.
Oh, no, not at all. I couldn't agree more. I mean, one of the highest poverty rates in the country, one of the poorest public health outcomes in the country, one of the poorest education levels of the country. This is a state that has many aspects of life deficiency because of consistent Republican leadership. And they should be called out with facts and with that same ferocity that you just shared. I think it's worth noting that this guy, while he has another absurdist stunt and just tries to go one identity category after the other to attack, which is the strategy of just attacking various sorts of boogeyman antagonists to rile people up and just say, okay, I'm so scared, better just go with you, you're the tough guy. But notice at the same time, this is within a week of when this guy has deployed the state police department to infiltrate Jackson, which is Lubumba, 80% progressive mayor, 80% black, huh? So what this guy is doing at the same time is essentially some sort of neo version of a martial law system wherever black people are. Huh? So it's really obvious what this guy is all about, and he needs to be exposed for being horrible in so many ways.
Yep. Unfortunately, we're way out of time, guys. So everybody check out John on Damage Report. That leads our programming, starts at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 o'clock Eastern. Everybody check that out every day, Monday through Friday. And Ramesh is a professor at UCLA. He is a professor of information studies. I don't know how you check that out. Enroll at UCLA. But Ramesh, thank you for brilliant and joining us as always.
I love it. Thank you for having me.
All right, excellent. We'll be right back, and we've got a very controversial story of a choking death in New York, and that is going to bring out emotions on a lot of sides. We'll be back.
Our system is inherently rigged against the will of the people.
They have 50% of the vote, and in a democracy, they should have 50% of the seats.
But if you live in an insanely gerrymandered district, your vote functionally doesn't matter.
We drew the map in a way that even though we get 50% of the vote, we're gonna get 13 out of the 18 seats.
You don't actually have the ability to translate the will of the voters in your area into actual government policy.
They should not be allowed to gerrymander these districts. We should actually have a democracy.
Been honest with him, like, yeah, I was upset with you and I shouldn't have done it, but instead I was like, I'm just trying to protect my engagement ring.
At TYT, our mission is to boldly pursue truth, challenge the establishment, and drive positive change. At a time when corporate capture of our media, our government, and our politics is nearly absolute, everyday working people need a champion to fight for them and to push back against the powerful interests that threaten our democracy itself. At TYT, we're proudly progressive and call out corruption and duplicity wherever we see it, from Republicans, Democrats, or anyone else. And unlike mainstream news media outlets, we're not beholden to corporate advertisers, to defense contractors, to Wall Street, or to Big Pharma. We only have to answer to our audience, and for nearly 2 decades, we've accomplished that by delivering honest, timely, and insightful perspectives on the day's news without fear or favor or concern for whose toes we might step on or which powerful elites we might offend. And while we're super serious about the news, we also manage to do it in a way that is fun and lighthearted. We can do this together and serve our audience, and yes, have fun doing it.
Indisputable has been named the fastest growing news TV show in the United States of America. compared to all shows on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and roughly 30 others. What do we do on this show? We tell the truth. You know why we tell the truth? Because the truth is simply indisputable. Donald Trump radicalized citizens. He's the chief terrorist. Republicans still want you to think that critical race theory is the greatest evil that can happen in K through 12 education. It's not even taught. I guarantee you this, David. If he would have taken a knee during the national anthem to bring awareness to the need for more money for cancer research in America, he would not have had that response. It was the fact that he took a knee for black folk and brown folk. You rather pick the voters because you're scared of the voters picking the politicians. It frightens you. But we coming. When you are in a privileged position, equality looks like oppression to you. The Karenicity runs deep in this one. We provide a mirror for reflection and a mirror for correction.
So what if I have 35? Don't hit me. Don't touch me. Don't touch me.
So let's put up the graphic of this Karen in peak performance. Boom. They want anarchy so they can start creating their own rules.
Can you share with me some examples?
When they were running around during the terrorist attack on January 6th saying, hang Mike Pence. So those are the people I'm talking about. That's a problem, correct? You work for Mike Pence, stand up for the guy. Do not allow the ideology of politics to evaporate the humanity that still exists inside of you. They don't stop, I don't stop. Racism won't stop, I won't stop. Systemic bias won't stop, so I won't stop. People still need health care, so I won't stop. People still need criminal justice systems reformed in this country, so I won't stop. And you won't stop either.
All right, another power panel. Cenk Uygur, Adrian Lawrence. Adrian, of course, the star of Overruled on Rebel Headquarters. Make sure you check that out. Ricky Strom, the star of TYT Sports. Great to have you both. We got a lot of stories for you guys, including a super controversial one in a little bit about the choking in New York City. But first, Adrian's got different stories for us.
Yes, that's right. We have some breaking news coming to us from Georgia. At least 8 of the 16 Trump electors being investigated by the Fulton County District Attorney have accepted immunity deals. That's right, 8 of 16 have accepted immunity deals. The district attorney, Fani Willis, has reportedly told these 8 that they will not be charged if they testify truthfully about what they know about Trump and his cohorts' efforts to overturn Joe Biden's win in the Peach State. And we got this for you from the Washington Post. Willis has said that the meeting of Trump's electors on December 14, 2020, despite Republican Governor Brian Kemp's certification of Biden's win, is a key target of her investigation, along with Trump's phone calls to multiple state officials and his campaign's potential involvement in an unauthorized breach of election equipment in rural Coffee County, Georgia. And the potential impact of these immunity deals looks like this. So the news that some, but likely not all, of the electors will not be charged raises new questions about the scope of Willis's examination of the meeting of electors, all of whom she had previously identified as criminal targets in her investigation. The electors who accepted immunity did so without any promise that they would offer incriminating evidence in return. And they all have stated that they remain unified in their innocence and are not aware of any criminal activity among any of the other electors, DeBrow said. Now, this news of the immunity deal, it comes a little over about a week after Fani Willis had announced that any criminal indictment she would issue would be issued between July 11th and September 1st. Now, Willis had to essentially push back her original timeline, given the reports that the electors' attorneys had not told them about her offering these immunity deals. So clearly now we can decipher that these electors now know, and at least 8 of 16 of them have accepted those deals, which means that hopefully they will speak honestly and give us the whole truth and nothing but the truth as it concerns Trump and co. trying to overturn the Georgia election results down there for the president. Cenk.
So I have mixed feelings about this story. The part that I'm a little worried about is every once in a while there'll be a breaking story about how Trump's gonna get indicted and oh my God, this time they got him, this time they got him. And then that just repeats hundreds of times over and over and over again. The MSNBC crowd goes nuts, but they never actually get him, right? On the other hand, it could be super impactful. Why this particular story? Because to me, the most important thing out of all of the charges against, potential charges against Donald Trump is the fake elector scheme. Because that's the one that was the coup. That was a political coup against this country, where they were. It wasn't the riot. The riot was just supposed to delay things for a little while and scare the Congress people so that they would not certify the election. Once they didn't certify the election, which is a regular process that the rioters were trying to interrupt, they were then going to bring in the fake electors, the ones that were going to say that Donald Trump had won, when they knew that he had not won, right? Now, to what degree did those electors know it, or were they just, brainwashed zombies, that believe in 2,000 mules and all that nonsense? Was there a conversation among the Trump administration and the electors, or Trump himself and the electors, acknowledging that they knew they had lost, but were gonna try to rig the election in their favor anyway? Now, if they have that, that's gold, okay? And then you convict them of something very significant, which is honestly just flat out overturning our democracy. So now in Georgia, it's about the Georgia election itself. It's not the Jack Smith federal case, which is more of what I'm talking about. But I wonder, can she add to the charges? How does this relate to the charges she has? Can that affect the federal case that Jack Smith is working on? Or at the end, it might be a giant nothing burger. They come in and they go, oh no, we thought that Trump had actually won. So, but the fact that they got immunity tells you that, hey, maybe there's something there. And that's the place where you would have the most damning information about Trump. But at this point, we just have evidence that they're going in that direction, and maybe they got something because they're giving immunity, but we don't know what the substance of it is yet.
So here's how I feel about this real quick, is that I agree with what Cenk is saying, that every time we feel like we're getting close to a charge being had, and as he phrased it, the MSNBC crowd goes nuts and it never happens. I'm pretty much like I take the Chicago Cubs pre-World Series route. Like, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. Like I'm just not there yet. I don't think I'll be there yet. Then being granted immunity, I agree, is a very, very big deal. But we have seen previous folks who have been granted immunity, even from the J6 hearings, where they have given their own testimony to the American public, and it hasn't done much to not only deter the base, but also bring any sort of charge against Trump. Now, with Fulton County, there's so many different things, and Cenk sort of differentiated for you all of those things. But this goes back to, from what I saw through those hearings, when Ruby Freeman was threatened, and it showed the level of the system that they had in place in order to try and get this done. And they were really, really close to getting it done. They just had a few hiccups here and there, but I still remain one of those pessimists per se that are like, I just don't know if anything is gonna stick to this guy. It could be the phone calls, it could be the amount of times that he has ruffled feathers with his fellow Republicans who it seems like badly wanna turn on him, but just won't. I'm just not there yet until we actually see something of substance. It's a step in the right direction, but it's far from over.
I agree with you. It is far from over, most definitely, especially given, all of the wrenches that Trump eventually ends up putting into things. And you never know who comes out of the woodwork and supports him and has his back. I do know that this immunity is very interesting in part because it's only 8 of 16 who have accepted the immunity deal. So you have to wonder what is going on with the other 8. In particular, it's my understanding that some of the issues that the other 8 may be running into is the fact that they were engaged in other crimes, things that have been discovered during this investigation, and thus they did not accept the immunity deal or was not extended to them because it wouldn't necessarily insulate them from those other crimes that may have been discovered during this investigation process. I also do know it makes sense if these 8 who did accept the deal did so because they do not want to be looped into the conspiracy or conspiratorial aspect that goes with having other members of the elector group having also committed crimes. Because if there is a conspiracy, even if you jump in at a certain point, you get charged with it just like everybody else. You can't just say I was only in it for this little bit. But I think it's going to be interesting as things continue to unfold for Fani Willis down in Georgia, just as it's interesting as things continue to unfold on the federal level, as Cenk mentioned with Jack Smith's investigation, because it just took a turn in terms of the classified documents. Not only have the prosecutors secured another cooperating witness, but they also expanded their reach into a foreign adversary. But first, let's go to the new witness. All right, so the existence of an insider witness whose identity has not been disclosed could be a significant step in the investigation, which is overseen by Jack Smith, the special counsel appointed by Attorney General Merrick Garland. And that's per the New York Times. Continued with, the witness is said to have provided investigators with a picture of the storage room where the material had been held. Little else is known about what prosecutors might have learned from the witness or when the witness first began to provide information to the prosecutors. The thing is, we know that the prosecutors had already secured the cooperation of Trump's valet, but his candor has been put into question. This man was apparently, he's been accused of moving boxes of those classified documents at Trump's direction. And so prosecutors are trying to get a fuller and more accurate picture. And as a result of that, DOJ is roping in more witnesses, which the New York Times had also detailed for us. They said in the past few weeks, at least 4 more Mar-a-Lago employees have been subpoenaed, along with another person who had visibility into Mr. Trump's thinking. When he first returned material to the National Archives, according to people briefed on the matter, 2 said that nearly everyone who works at Mar-a-Lago had been subpoenaed, and that some who serve in fairly obscure jobs have been asked back by investigators. Now, new information about DOJ's subpoena practice also seems to suggest something quite interesting, which is that the feds are taking a broader look that goes into Trump's business practices, particularly with individuals abroad. One of the previously unreported subpoenas to the Trump organization sought records pertaining to Mr. Trump's dealings with a Saudi-backed professional golf venture known as Lev Golf, which is holding tournaments at some of Mr. Trump's golf resorts. And if you can recall, this was kind of a big deal in terms of that entanglement with the Saudis since Trump has left office.
Okay, to me that was a giant ding, 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 ding in the middle of the story. Oh, by the way, the classified documents, and we've got a witness, and he's turned, etc. Saudis. I was like, wait, what are the Saudis doing in the middle of the classified document story? That is super interesting. Now, if you remember, the very first thing that I said about this document story when we found out about it was, why the hell would anybody take top secret nuclear documents home? There's only 2 possible answers. One is, oh, I didn't know the nuclear secrets were in that box, and I just grabbing random boxes. I mean, Trump is so not bright that that's not impossible, right? He was just trying to hoard things, etc., and he was gonna have it as a momentum, brag about it at Mar-a-Lago. I don't know, right? The other possibility, and the one that is much, much more likely, is to take advantage of those documents somehow. How would you take advantage of those documents? By selling them. It's not overly complicated. And so now people in mainstream media never ever talk about that because they think it's too speculative. And they probably are still under the delusion of, no, Trump has some boundaries. He wouldn't do that. I talked about it on day one because I know for a fact that Donald Trump has no boundaries. So my best guess is, yeah, he took home super classified documents to sell them and make money. Oh, scandalous. The guy who's obsessed with money, that's all he ever cares about. That's all he ever wanted to use the presidency for. A guy who's nearly broke takes home the most valuable top secret information we have. And he's got buddies in all of these places like Saudi Arabia. And I think I might have literally mentioned them as one of the possibilities. And remember, the Saudis gave his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, $2 billion right after the election to invest for them in his private equity company that he formed a day ago, right? That has no track record at all, and there's no reason to believe that it would be any success. Jared Kushner is a miserable failure in real estate and business. So guys, the New York Times is not going to put that in the middle of the story, and the prosecutors are not going to mention that unless it is relevant to those classified documents. So that's a potentially giant development. I got more on it, but Rick, what do you think?
Yeah, please. So from a sports perspective, I've covered this story a lot, and basically Live Golf is funded by the Public Investment Fund, which is the arm of Saudi Arabia. They control well over 94% of it. Basically, there's a ruling in court right now. There's something going on in court right now where essentially Live Golf wanted to trademark Live, but it was blocked by Live Miami. So there's like a court case going on right now. The PGA is hoping that there are explosive pieces of evidence to fund their case and show how terrible of an operation this is and how they've hampered on their own business. Now, let me be very clear about this. From a Live Golf perspective, we sort of knew what was going on here because after the January 6th insurrection, there was a lot to this. Essentially, that the PGA wanted to and successfully pulled golf tournaments. You're seeing some of the crowds, which were shoddy at best. This piece of video is when he defended Saudi Arabia, saying, we don't really know what happened at 9/11. If he were a poker player, he would be one of the worst because he shows his hand every time who he's for and who he's against. Now, when it comes to Live Golf and Trump, the whole reason that he wanted to go all in on this is because the PGA pulled the PGA championship away from Trump Bedminster. He lost a ton of money. Live Golf comes in. They go, okay, here's what we're gonna do. You helped us out, we're gonna help you out. We're gonna put all of your properties, a lot of your properties on notice for Live Golf. We don't know what those funds are. We don't know what they're paying him every single time that they go and set up shop at one of his properties. But what we do know is when he was president, he wrote off so much to the taxpayers to the tune of well over, I think, $145 million by amping up the prices of food, beverage, cart fees, course fees, what have you, anything that you could think of. So this is him losing money to the PGA and then gaining it with Saudi Arabia. It's a really, really interesting twist that I wish more people would definitely focus on.
So I'm gonna say two more things about that. So first, if this is just an issue of, hey, Donald Trump is backing this Saudi Live Golf venture and he's letting them use their course and he's making money off that. Okay, but I got that as I don't really care. I mean, of all the different crimes that Trump has done, that's not even a crime. You want to back the butchers of Riyadh? That's up to you, okay? And people can judge you for it, although no one on your side will. But if somehow it involves those top secret documents, and that's what the story's about, and they're using the Live Golf as a way of funneling Trump money for something else, i.e. the documents, then that case is explosive. Because it is even remotely possible that right-wing voters would go, selling nuclear secrets to the Saudis is a bridge too far for even some of us, right?
You really think that?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think that it might be, I don't think it's all of them. Could it affect 20% of MAGA? Like we're really selling nukes to the Muslim fundamentalists that love Sharia law and believe the same things ISIS believes?
Well, first off, they don't even know what Sharia law is, considering the arguments that Marjorie Taylor Greene has made. Anything that they define as something they don't like is Sharia law or woke. So like, it doesn't really matter in that sense. They can't even define half of the terms that they use. When it comes to this is the essence of sports washing, guys. Like, this is exactly what we've been talking about. It is the cozying up and painting a positive public image to a region like Saudi Arabia in the Middle East to say they're just like us. Look, they're letting women drive, even though they locked up an activist named Lujain and tortured her and crushed her soul when she was the brain behind that entire movement. So I completely disagree with you. I actually think they'd be like, oh, Saudi Arabia doesn't actually seem that bad because of what they have accomplished with a lot of Trump voters with Live Golf. I am not saying everybody, by the way. I need to be very clear about that. I am not saying every conservative, every member of the MAGA movement. What I am saying is they have had this vehicle in motion for years in order to paint the picture that, hey, they're doing business with our guy. They're kind of like us. And I believe that it has worked by signing Dustin Johnson, by signing Phil Mickelson, even though he's totally washed up, by signing a lot of other American players and basically cozying up to them. And as I said, painting this picture that they're decent people when we know the truth.
Okay, last two things here. Remember, the essence of this story that Adrian told us is they've got a cooperating witness now inside Mar-a-Lago, okay? One of the critical questions is, when Trump told his lawyers, go and look at that closet, basically, where we've got all the boxes, the storage room, did he tell others, like his valet, move the documents out of the room before my lawyers go in to verify what's in there? Because if he told them that, that means he knows that he's trying to hide documents from the FBI and the United States government. That is a huge admission, basically, or evidence towards culpability and intent. It wasn't like, oops, I slipped up and got the nuclear secrets. It's no, I took the nuclear secrets or the other classified documents, and then when I told even my own lawyers and the government, because the lawyers are going to tell the government, oh sure, everything's fine, we know what's in the storage room, etc. Right? When I told all those people that, oh, I guess I brought some home, you can go and look there. Well, then that would be proven to be a lie if he instructed someone else to move the documents out. Okay, and I will say, just back on the point that we've been talking about on Saudi Arabia, I'll go further, and this is a bold claim, I get it, but oh boy. if he's charged with trying to sell classified information, especially about nukes, to Saudi Arabia, he's not going to win. He's not going to win the general election for sure, and he'll probably lose the primary. Now, again, that's speculation. We don't know that yet. We just have the story that the Saudis are somehow connected. Adrian, give you the last word.
I will definitely say I have no idea why a valet would stick their neck out for Trump in any way. If anything, with that level of government interference and that level of issues going on in terms of criming, I would flip with a quickness, end up, state's witness, and then go witness protection. I'd be out somewhere in Arizona living my good life on the government's dime for the rest of it. And so I just don't get it. What is it that this valet is not gonna get if he goes, witness protection as opposed to continue to work for Trump, shining his wheels? Get out of here. It's just foolish.
Yeah, and by the way, we don't, and it looks like the valet, or this story could be a head fake and it actually is the valet. But for now, the story is saying that the valet has not flipped. It's someone else that has flipped, okay, on Trump within Mar-a-Lago. And then we'll see what kind of evidence they have and how damning it is. Okay.
All right.
We got to take a break. When we come back, the choking story out of New York. Back on TYT, Jeff Beltari, thank you for your contribution on YouTube Super Chat. We appreciate it. Mike Paul says, I cannot vote for an 80-year-old. I hope Senator Klobuchar will run in 2024. We're talking about Biden in the first hour. And so, for example, I'm not a big fan of Klobuchar. I wouldn't go in that direction. But having said that, at this point, I'm near ABB, anyone but Biden. And not because I think Biden's the most reprehensible person, although I don't believe the hype that he's been a good president at all. But because I think it's a near guaranteed loss. I mean, it's possible that Trump sold nukes to the Saudis or nuclear secrets to the Saudis. The Republican primary voters don't care. They put him in anyway. And yeah, I guess anyone, alive or not, can beat Trump in that scenario. But it's for sure playing with fire to put Biden as the Democratic nominee. But the establishment hates the idea of anyone that isn't already an incumbent and already in power. Anyways, Aaron Relia, thank you for the contribution on Super Chat as well. Jonah Morton writes in, I would love a robot that would take care of me in my old age. That sounds awesome. Give me Rosie from the Jetsons. It's funny that was referring to our AI story. Stephanie Haynes says, 2 questions. So when AI takes over everything, who will the bigots accuse of stealing their jobs? And will big government give us universal income since AI is apparently taking over everything? So we did talk about universal basic income in that story, but to your point about who would the bigots accuse? Well, I mean, it might unite us. Maybe the left wing and the right wing will be like, oh, it turns out we're not the problem, it's the robots, right? Which, by the way, again, is actually true. I wish they would realize the real problem is the corporate machines and not the 2 different ends of the political spectrum of the American people. Chris Birch writes in, Cenk, we rail on Democrats, but credits to be given where they deserve it. Bernie and Sheldon Whitehouse have absolutely been putting in time about this issue, meaning the Clarence Thomas issue. I've been impressed actually now harder. Chris, agree 100%. I gave Sheldon Whitehouse some credit there on that story. Bernie's been good on it too. And Durbin's actually has a pulse, which is surprising. So always credit where credit is due. I just wish that there were more of them and Biden was among them for asking for accountability. Ryan Mathis says, hey TUIT, I wanted to say thank you for being one of the few progressive beacons of light in the media and my main source of news. Keep up the great work and much love. Thank you, Ryan, we appreciate it. On TYT, Cenk, Ricky, and Adrian with you guys, but also Ryan Mathis just gifted 5 YouTube memberships, Young Turks memberships on YouTube, and Angelo Andrzejewski gifted 10. So you guys are amazing, we appreciate it. Everyone, you can hit the join button below to become a member if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not, tyt.com/join. Real simple, you get all of our shows and you support what we're doing here on air. All right, Adrian, what's the next story?
Well, we're heading out to the Big Apple where calls for justice in the New York City subway killing of Jordan Neely are growing as the tragedy raises issues of racial bias, particularly in light of what has emerged about Neely's killer. Now, the 30-year-old unhoused black man, Mr. Neely, he suffered from mental illness and he was killed on Monday by a fellow rider and a former Marine who is named Daniel Penny. Now, here are photos of the 2 men. The first set of photos, hopefully we can get those up. Yes, that is the victim, Jordan Neely, performing on the subway and then sharing a meal with his family. And then we have pictures here of Daniel Penny, who took Neely's life on the subway on Monday. He's reportedly separated from the Marines in 2021 and is from Islip. Now, before we show you graphic footage of the encounter, here's what we know that led up to it, per NPR. Neely, a black man who had performed on subway platforms as a Michael Jackson impersonator, had been complaining of hunger and thirst while riding an F train in Manhattan on Monday, according to journalist Juan Alberto Vázquez, who witnessed the incident. Vasquez described his account in a Facebook post in which he shared a 4-minute video showing the encounter. Neely shouted that he was fed up, that he didn't care if he went to prison, and that he was ready to die, Vasquez wrote. Neely then took off his jacket and aggressively threw it on the subway car floor, but did not appear to want to attack anyone, according to the journalist. Then a white 24-year-old passenger, that's Penny, on the train put Neely in a headlock and held him in the position for 15 minutes, Vasquez said. 2 other bystanders also stepped in to help the man restrain Neely. Now, here is the footage that Vasquez had captured, which Vasquez explained starts about 3 or 4 minutes into the chokehold. And again, this is disturbing footage.
The incident that you see here was shot by Juan Alberto Vasquez, who was on the subway train at the time. As you can see, Jordan is being held down by another rider, locked on the ground, while 2 other passengers restrain him. Vasquez said the chokehold lasted for about 15 minutes.
Yes, and Neely was unconscious when the police arrived, and he was later pronounced dead at the hospital. Now, despite the coroner's ruling, Neely's death, which is compression of the neck, as a homicide, well, Penny was questioned and then released without charges by the NYPD. But given the national outcry that's been going on all week long, Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg says that his office is investigating the matter in terms of whether to bring charges against Penny. And meanwhile, Penny has retained Thomas Kennett. That's the Republican defense attorney who happened to lose the DA race against Bragg in 2021. And I can tell you from watching that clip and also understanding of the circumstances, it seems far too excessive, especially if that individual is a Marine and he has training. He should know better in terms of putting someone in a chokehold for 15 minutes, that would eventually lead to a loss of life. This is very scary.
Yeah, so look, unfortunately, in a story like this, both camps instantly come up with their side and decide that the facts can come in later and we'll sort it out, right? So from the right-wing perspective, this guy, Neely, is super dangerous and somebody had to protect the people on the train and it's self-defense, etc. Well, but first of all, you don't know any of that. Is the question of whether it's self-defense is absolutely critical to this. For the left wing, I be honest, maybe legislators and others had information much quicker than the rest of us, or I did, but they just jumped in right away and said it's definitely murder. But wait, doesn't it matter what actually happened? So it looks like for now, and we still, there's a lot of other tapes that the cops apparently have, but we do not have. So we're gonna get into Neely and his background in a little bit, okay? But are there people who act erratically and attack people on New York subways? Yes, there absolutely are, okay? If people are jittery about that, I don't think it's crazy to be worried about it. Did Neely say that he doesn't care if he goes to jail for life, etc.? And is that disconcerting if you're on that subway train? Yes, according to the witnesses, apparently he did say that. Yes, I would argue that is disconcerting. But here's the critical part. For now, it appears that the witnesses say that Neely did not attack anyone. Now, if that's not true, or there's other witnesses or there's other tape, that would be absolutely critical. Even if you think it's not important, and I do think it's important, it certainly would be super important in a trial, right? Whether it's self-defense or not. But if it turns out that the witnesses that we have heard from so far are correct, that Penny put him in the chokehold from behind and he had not been attacked and no one else had been attacked, well, that's damning for Penny. Because you can't just say, hey, that guy said something really weird and outrageous and I'm a little worried about it, I'm now gonna go choke him for 15 minutes. That's not a thing you're allowed to do, okay? So there's a lot more complexity to this, but Ricky, what do you think?
Okay, so we're gonna get into a lot of this, but let me just give the opinion once again, because I have a background in sports and I have covered boxing, I've covered MMA. At the highest levels, professionals, when it comes to mixed martial arts, when they have their opponent who is a trained professional in a sanctioned fight, in a rear naked choke, that fighter at the peak of athletic ability, mentally and physically, they're usually rendered unconscious with a clean rear naked choke in about 8 to 10 seconds. Blood stops flowing to the brain, according to doctors on this subject, in about 4 to 6 minutes. 15 minutes is excessive. I don't care what anybody says about this. I don't care what Matt Walsh says about this. I don't care what some others on the right may say. If those who do this professionally and doctors are weighing in saying that it's roughly about 4 to 6 minutes before oxygen stops flowing to the brain, what's the argument for 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Personally, I don't see one, and that's just from a sports perspective between trained MMA fighters. Now, on top of this, one thing that stuck out to me was Penny rose to sergeant, and he wrote on a job board that his experience as a squad leader on deployment led him to realize he was passionate about helping, communicating, and connecting to different people from all over the world. I find this entire story to be a travesty, and I know that we're focusing on this, but let me just say, this is a product of the United States not caring about its own citizens. This is not a mental health crisis. It is. It's not just a mental health crisis. This has to do with lack of health care. And I want to sum this up very quickly. But someone who is going through that should not be homeless. They should be able to get the care that they need. A story that I covered previously was of a former professional baseball player named Andrew Tolles, who was found to have serious mental health issues, anxiety, depression. He was arrested behind an airport. The Dodgers signed him in order for him to get health care. These people should not have to have a $1 billion company sign them, or even CVS sign them to a minimum wage, if it's even there, to get healthcare. It's the embodiment of how this country from the Reagan years do not give a damn about its citizens and would rather have people go homeless than support them.
Yes, and so with the job board, are you talking about Neely making that post, wanting to connect people, or the former Marine who killed him?
Former Marine.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I could care less what he put on the job post in port, because it's kind of like you said, coming from behind and jumping a man who isn't lunging at anyone in any way and then holding him for 15 minutes. At what point did you not realize you need to let go because the man is rendered unconscious? He's not getting blood flow to his brain. That separation is problematic for me. Why hold him in that position for 15 minutes? Yeah, right. And also the report is also that he wasn't in any way physically aggressive, and even in terms of defending himself, that to the extent he was moving, it was because he was being choked out. And so again, I could care less what the man put on a job board. The fact is that he attacked a man who wasn't anything other than sick. And as someone who's lived in New York for several years and traveled only exclusively by subway, I can confirm there are tons of people on the subway who have moments, but you're not in a situation where you fear that you need to attack someone. It's just, it was excessive and it was egregious, and there's something else going on, but there's no way in hell that Penny should get away with it.
Yeah,
without a doubt. It should be manslaughter at the least.
So let me just jump in and make a couple comments about what both of you said, and then we really got to get the rest of the story on Neely too. So number one, when I was a kid, I watched wrestling. I thought the moves were fake. I did a sleeper hold on a friend, and like Ricky said, I don't remember if it was 10 seconds or 20 seconds, but I knocked him out cold. I had no idea, and so it scared me to death. And if you got taught that move and you know it's not fake and you know it's real, you cannot keep anyone in that move. Their initial reports were that it was 7 to 8 minutes, 15 minutes, it doesn't matter. You cannot keep someone in that hold for that long. It's a minor miracle he lasted that long before he died. And so that's clear. Whether who jumped who, to me, is absolutely pivotal. And Adrian is right. I lived in New York. If you attacked every homeless person who came in and said something outrageous in a subway train, you'd be killing people endlessly in New York. That is not the right standard at all. But I do think that Neely should have been institutionalized before this. Some might find that controversial. I don't think so at all. But that's based on his history. So Adrian, why don't you tell us about that?
Absolutely, we need to get to that as well, definitely, because we know that the response from New York leadership was not on point of what it should have been, particularly coming from Governor Kathy Hochul and Mayor Eric Adams. Really much, it came off tone deaf. And so here's Hochul speaking as if Neely was the assailant.
That was deeply disturbing, and that causes a lot of fear in people. And actually, the mayor and I are working so hard to restore that sense of safety. We have the cameras on the subways. We have more police officers. We're assisting with overtime. We've been doing so much, and the numbers have been improving. The number of crimes on subways has been declining. And I don't want people to feel anxious again when something like that comes to light. It is deeply disturbing.
The thing is the reason that Neely is being seen automatically as the aggressor is because he's homeless. This is a class issue. Race is also very much wrapped up in this, but we know this is a homelessness issue in terms of how people are treated. We also know that advocates of homelessness have been speaking out, including Congresswoman AOC. She tweeted this: "I have yet to hear a real explanation from any official hesitating to condemn the killing of Jordan Neely about what makes condemning this violence so complicated. Killing is wrong, killing the poor is wrong, killing the mentally ill is wrong. Why is that so hard to say?" Neely's last words were literally about how going to jail was easier than accessing the social safety net support to get back on his feet and lead a life. Yet leaders want to raise his record as if that warrants a public execution on the subway. What have we come to? Now, AOC was referring to Neely having been arrested 42 times for charges that include petty larceny, jumping turnstiles, 3 unprovoked assaults while living on the street. And a lot of this seems right on par in terms of someone who is mentally ill, but also lives on the street, and the over-policing that we know happens with Black individuals in this country. But also, notwithstanding his record, a lot of community activists have spoken out. We're gonna go ahead and move to the last note here about Neely's history. He hasn't always been homeless. Things changed for him when he was about 14 and his mother died violently. Christine Neely was strangled in New Jersey, and her body was later found in a suitcase along a roadway. And that's when families say things took a turn for him. This per CNN. After his mother was murdered in 2007, Jordan Neely eked out a life as a well-known Michael Jackson impersonator in Times Square and on New York subways. But he apparently fell on hard times in recent years, according to a friend and a relative, finding himself living on the street and struggling with the trauma of losing his mother. The thing is that any one of us could be Neely, and we don't deserve to be attacked and murdered by any kind of individual who just has a fear of us because we are having a moment and we're scared, and the social services are not there to support us.
Okay, look, so I'm gonna tell you why Hochul and Adams, so that's the New York governor and the New York city mayor, came out and seemingly seemed to be supporting the guy who did the choking as opposed to the guy who got choked. That's because the citizens of New York are sick of crime, and that's shown in the polling, and so they're reacting to that without looking at the actual facts of this case. Now, in the last year, 10 people have been killed in the subway system. That's why the citizens of New York are super mad about it. That's why they're responding that way. So I think Hochul and Adams are wrong for jumping to a conclusion out of the gate or seeming to jump to a conclusion. But I also think AOC is wrong. So why do I say that? Look, Neely is a person who is, got arrested 42 times. Yes, a lot of it was petty, like jumping turnstiles, etc. But the 3 people that he attacked were vicious attacks. He punched a 67-year-old in the face, broke her nose, broke her orbital bone. Random Mexican guy lives in Harlem, going to work. He punched him and did damage. And back in 2015, he took a 7-year-old girl and was seeming to try to kidnap her. Now, does that mean that Neely's a monster, etc.? And does that mean that you're allowed to kill him for something he did in 2015? No, it doesn't mean any of that. He's clearly got mental health issues. That's why I say when you take the 7-year-old girl, you either got to go to prison for a long time, and he did go to prison, by the way, or much more, what would be much better in my opinion is you need to get him help. But in order to get him help, you can't make it voluntary because he went back out there and did those things. But guys, all of that is moot. The question here is who attacked who? If Neely was attacking anyone on the system and Penny jumped in to stop that, that is one fact pattern, and he will almost certainly not be convicted if that's the case, okay? But if Neely didn't attack anyone, he just said something outrageous in the middle of a subway train, and Penny couldn't wait to be a hero, quote unquote, in his own mind, and jumped Neely and choked him to death, then he should go to prison, and that is a very, very serious crime. But we've got to get the facts first. So
what?
Yeah, Ricky, real quick.
Real quick. What I saw previously was the most aggressive he had been was throwing his jacket down on the ground. Those were the first reports that we saw of this. I haven't seen anything, because there were retractions in this story, that he had gotten violent with anybody. It continues to go back to the lack of healthcare that we offer people who are in dire need. If we had it, he would not have ended up in this position where he is begging people for food and water and saying he's hungry and thirsty. And the criminalization of homeless people as well, which goes well after healthcare on the spectrum. From Gavin Newsom to Eric Adams, who have D's next to their name when they run in every election, is ludicrous. And they have tried to paint the picture that homeless people are bad and homeless people are villains, when really they are simply our unhoused neighbors and deserve much better.
All right, we got to take a break, guys. We'll be right back. All right, back on TYT. Kabuki Dragon writes in, Jake, it's not crazy to be worried. It's crazy to preemptively murder someone. I'm concerned with this recent TYT trend of both sides. Like, no, guys, no matter how clearly I say things, it's misinterpreted. So I'm glad you're saying that so that I could clarify. Under no circumstances, if Neely didn't attack anyone, is Penny justified in jumping on him from behind and choking him to death? Okay, that is what you mean by preemptively murdering someone. That is not allowed under any circumstance, okay? And so what I'm saying is we don't know yet definitively that Neely only shouted, right? That is what one of the witnesses is saying. If he's right, and he's very likely right, okay? So he's the witness that has come forward. Then Penny's in a lot of trouble, and he should be, okay? But if Neely attacks someone, there's two different issues. One is, okay, what do you think of that morally? And that's an interesting conversation. And the other is, what's going to happen legally? And I guarantee you he'll use self-defense. And if Kyle Rittenhouse situation is any guide at all, he'll probably get off. So that's why I bring that up. So I want to be clear. And then if you're still mad at me and saying, no, I don't care. If Neely punched someone, attacked someone, you shouldn't try to restrain him. Okay, then you could be mad at me. But remember, guys, that is not the fact pattern as we know it today. As we know it today, there's one witness. We don't see in the beginning of the video how the fight got started. And it's not really a fight, it's Penny jumping him, it appears. But that one witness says Neely did not hit anyone. So in that case, there is no justification at all for attacking him. Okay, So Stephen Scale says, if you choke someone for 15 minutes, that's a homicide, straight up. But guys, I also want to ask you this, and now we're gonna run out of time. But you saw the person of color helping Penny, right? And so is he an accomplice to murder? So it depends. Were they trying to earnestly hold him down, or did Penny desperately want to attack someone and pretend that he was a hero? And what did the person of color think as he was holding down Neely? Is he irresponsible? Those are interesting questions, that's all. Adrian's got more about this in a second. All right, back on TYT. We've got two really important stories for you guys in the member section today. Trump in the rape trial of E. Jean Carroll, the things he said are outrageous. We've got the video on it. And then the further Ginni Thomas corruption that we promised you earlier. Those are for the members in the bonus episode, tyt.com/join to become a member, or hit the join button below. Adrian, you wanted to add one thing about the Neely case.
Yeah, so my concern with Penny is that this whole situation is going to be a repeat performance of what happened with Bernard Goetz back in 1984, the subway vigilante, 37-year-old white man who went ahead and shot 4 young black teens after they had surrounded him in the subway and asked him for $5. And as a result of that, when Goetz was charged with a range of offenses, the jury ended up saying not guilty. It was an effective jury nullification because New Yorkers were so angry and upset about the city not protecting them from crime. And so I could see that same situation happening here with Penny ending up getting an acquittal because our society is seeing these underhoused people who have mental illness as a threat to them. And that is not fair, and nor is it justice. And I'll also note that Bernard Goetz's case, that it became one of the leading reasons that the NRA, was successful in loosening concealed carrying firearms in the state of New York because they were able to leverage that fear. And the thing is, it shouldn't be leveraged here. You shouldn't just be afraid of a black man with mental illness.
Yep. All right, guys, we got to go to the member section. Thank you for watching, guys.
Indisputable has been named the fastest growing news TV show in the United States of America, compared to all shows on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and roughly 30 others. What do we do on this show? We tell the truth. You know why we tell the truth? Because the truth is simply indisputable. Donald Trump radicalized citizens. He's the chief terrorist. Republicans still want you to think that critical race theory is the greatest evil that can happen in K-12 education. It's not even taught. I guarantee you this, David. If he would have taken a knee during the national anthem to bring awareness to the need for more money for cancer research in America, he would not have had that response. It was the fact that he took a knee for black folk and brown folk. You rather pick the voter